What is going on? Welcome back to Jiu-Jitsu Outlet. Today, I'm going to talk about the viral sensation happening right now in the Jiu-Jitsu community, the Craig Jones Invitational. If you haven't been paying attention to the internet today, maybe you missed this, but Craig Jones went on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast to talk about his new event, the Craig Jones Invitational. So if you've been sleeping under a rock in the jiu-jitsu community, you might have missed this one, but Craig's been talking about this for quite some time. If you follow his social media, kind of hinting that he was going to start his own jiu-jitsu tournament. And he's been joking it's because he can't win ADCC, so he's just going to start his own competition. People have been calling it BDCC, but recently the actual name was revealed, the Craig Jones Invitational. When he was on Joe Rogan's podcast, he talked about following in the footsteps of the legend Eddie Bravo, saying that Eddie couldn't win ADCC, and now he has his own invitational, and now Craig is trying to do the exact same thing. So if you haven't heard, Craig is giving away $1 million to the winner of his tournament, which is crazy because if you don't know, ADCC pays out about $10,000 to the winner of their tournament. Craig Jones, however, is giving $10,001 just to show up to compete at his tournament. So in other words, you get just as much money for showing up to compete in Craig's tournament as you do for winning ADCC. Now, this is where there's some controversy, is Craig is holding his event the same exact weekend that ADCC is having their World Championships later this year in August. And now Craig did specify that I think his event is Friday, Saturday, and then the ADCC finals are on Sunday. So actually, if you think about it like that, from his view, you can still go to both events. And honestly, I mean, I love watching the first day of ADCC itself, but obviously everyone cares the most about the finals and the absolute division and the super fight, which is all on that last day. So he was basically saying, like, yes, it's on the same weekend. Yes, it might prevent the athletes from not competing in the same event, but the fans are really going to win because we're going to be gifted just like the Super Bowl of Jiu-Jitsu that weekend, basically. We're going to have the Craig Jones Invitational, and then we're going to have the ADCC finals. So I feel like that hasn't been talked about enough because people keep talking about like, oh, it's the same weekend, it's the same weekend. And yes, that does prevent the athletes from not competing in the same, but let's be real, we're still going to have some amazing athletes at ADCC. By all accounts, it looks like Gordon Ryan is still going to be competing at ADCC, assuming that his health is in good order. So ADCC is still going to get a lot of viewership. They're still going to be at the T-Mobile Arena. I guarantee you they're going to have a lot of people show up to watch. They still have a lot of big athletes who are going to be competing there, like the Ruotolo brothers haven't put out yet if they're switching over. So I feel like ADCC is still going to be a good event. It's still going to have viewership. It's still going to win. And Craig is, I think at the end of the day, he's going to be growing jiu-jitsu to the point that ADCC is going to win because the rising tide raises all ships. So hypothetically, if jiu-jitsu got millions of new viewers, that would mean a lot of new entries at the ADCC Opens, a lot of people tuning into previous ADCC tournaments to watch, the history, or they want to show up and watch the next ones in person. So what Craig Jones is doing is, like he's talked about in the interview with Joe Rogan, it's really meant to grow the sport. And he's trying to introduce a little bit of beef. And that was something in Joe Rogan's interview that I felt like Joe maybe didn't pick up as quickly, was that Craig is trying to do this from a place of growing the sport. And I love Joe Rogan. He's one of my favorite guys to watch. But sometimes I feel like he doesn't understand how that can be a part of marketing so much. And it's actually a good thing for both parties when there's a little bit of that competition. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand from a business perspective, is that if you have a bit of competition between two companies, think about it like two rappers. That's something that Craig Jones talked about. You find out that these rappers have a beef, and then you find out that they're actually signed to the same label. Like, I remember back when Eminem and Machine Gun Kelly had this crazy beef, and they both put out diss tracks about each other. And then, lo and behold, both of them were announcing tours and new albums and all this other stuff. And then you find out that, of course, they're funded all by the same people. So a lot of times I think that these things are good because they grow the careers of people, they grow the sport in general, and I think that that's what Craig is going to achieve. So let's talk about the event itself. I really feel like it's an amazing thing that's happening. Luke Rockhold is going to be competing, Nicky Rod, Joseph Chen, Nicky Ryan. Basically, it looks like all of B Team is going to obviously be competing at the Craig Jones Invitational. You know, any of the B Team members who are at ADCC, they're switching over. So, I mean, that's pretty obvious. The Tackett Brothers are both in, which is crazy. That was awesome. And, you know, it makes total sense because you have to go where your money is. And at the end of the day, if you're only going to win $10,000 and you have someone guaranteeing that you're going to make that same amount of money and you have an opportunity to make an extra $1 million, I mean, you have to take that opportunity if you're given, honestly. And people are talking about these athletes as if they have some sort of loyalty that they owe to ADCC. And I feel like that actually should go the other way. I feel like ADCC and these tournaments should be loyal to the athletes because at the end of the day, that's who this should all be for, is the practitioners and the fans. So I think ADCC does a great job of entertaining the fans, but it sounds like if you get a peek behind the scenes, they're not doing that with the athletes. And I think that's why this is such a great thing that's happening, is that finally we're seeing athletes being paid what they're worth. We saw the same thing happen at the PGF recently. I was backstage there a couple of weeks ago in Vegas, and we got to watch Andy Varela win $20,000, which was freaking awesome. So I love seeing this growth. I love seeing it happen. But honestly, Craig Jones is right. Like, if ADCC is supposed to be the most prestigious organization, why is the prize money half of what you win at PGF, for instance? And PGF obviously is trying to become the premier grappling league, so it's kind of a different thing. But I just feel like, given the growth we've seen in the sport, and there's a lot of money that has flooded into martial arts and into jiu-jitsu, it just makes sense. So I'm totally behind what Craig is doing. I can't wait to watch. Craig, if you want me to come backstage and interview athletes, hit me up. I'd love to be backstage just like I was at the PGF. So it's going to be fun. I'm going to be trying to do a lot more of that, like going to these different events and going backstage and doing interviews about how jiu-jitsu helps people off the mats. So yeah, this is something I'm super excited about because I feel like we're kind of in a golden age of jiu-jitsu and martial arts right now. Karate combat is really bringing a lot of eyes back to karate. The UFC obviously is bringing eyes to all martial arts, but mostly this, you know, these mixed styles, right? These all-encompassing fighters like Khabib or John Jones. These guys are becoming legends, rightfully so. And I think we're seeing the same thing happen in grappling now with organizations like the PGF and now the Craig Jones Invitational. And honestly, the guys who run ADCC seem like really smart business people, and I think that they will adapt and overcome. I think that they're probably right now trying to figure out how they can pivot or how they can change what they're doing so that they don't lose more of these athletes, which I think is a really good thing. So I feel like if we have more money that comes into ADCC because of this, then everyone is going to win. Fans, athletes, the promotions, everything. So I feel like what's going on is nothing but good. And honestly, we need it if we're going to grow grappling. We need some of these UFC fighters to come to compete in a grappling event and bring some of those eyes over to jiu-jitsu. We need maybe Khabib versus GSP to happen at the Craig Jones Invitational. Craig was hinting at some crazy super fights. He's going to have a match with Gabby Garcia, and he was talking a little bit with Joe Rogan. They had to bleep out the names because it's still a secret, but they're talking about some crazy super fight, and a lot of people on the internet are trying to figure out who it is. I think it's GSP versus Khabib, but write down below what's the secret super fight that Joe and Craig were talking about. What's your pick? And also, who you think is the secret funder? That's something that's been a topic of conversation. Who's funding this, and why is it definitely Mark Zuckerberg? And personally, I think Mark Zucks is totally behind this. Seems like him and Craig are buddies. I know that it seems like Mark and Volkanovski have trained together. Mark and Craig have rolled together and trained together. So they seem like they're friends, right? They seem like they've hung out. I don't know if they hang out regularly, but they've hung out and trained together, it seems like, on a handful of occasions. So you know as well as me, if you train, like once you start rolling with someone and hanging out, like you really do become buddies. And if you're suddenly buddies with someone who has an extra couple of $1 billion, and this dude loves martial arts, like Mark Zuckerberg seems to be freaking obsessed with martial arts, and he's one of the richest people in human history. You don't think he would donate $2 million? Like this is a guy who pays people to find ways for him to donate more of his money to charities, so he pays less taxes. So he has a buddy from jiu-jitsu practice who has this brilliant idea for a tournament and this brilliant, wonderful business idea that a bunch of your friends are supporting, and you're not going to donate 2 million of your measly billions of dollars to that event. So like if I had an extra $1 million, I would bet that it was Mark Zuckerberg. So Mark Zuckerberg, if you're watching this, which I know you see all, been trying to have you on the show, and I would love to ask you if you're the secret funder. So hit me up, Mark, in the comments if you're watching. Much love, guys. Comment below. Let me know what you think about everything I said about the Craig Jones Invitational, and peace. I'll see you.